Good morning, Happy Valley. All right, that didn't come out as good as I thought it would, but we'll let it slide.
First try. That was the first try.
Yeah, it's our back. Um, yeah, so this is going to be our daily podcast on the Penn State Rivals, aka Happy Valley Insider site. So I guess we'll just jump right into it. Penn State ended up not just winning, but destroying Iowa in the annual whiteout.
Yep.
I know you guys already did a post game pod on PSU 365, but Dylan, just give me your quick thoughts on what Penn State did on Saturday night.
Yeah, I mean, that was a really impressive performance, to say the least, for Penn State, just to dominate defensively, offensively. As I said on the Penn State 365 pod, it wasn't a sexy performance from the offense, but they did what they had to do to win that game. They were very content in just taking 3.5 yards per carry by, just running it up the middle a majority of the time. They didn't really try to go outside a ton. Early in the game, they tried that a few times. It didn't really work out. So Mike Yurcich kind of just stuck with what was working, was just the inside run game. And 3.5 yards per carry. But you have 3 carries, 3.5 yards per carry. That's a first down every time.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, we'll figure this out. We're gonna get it together. We'll get it together. We'll get it.
Yeah.
We were not interrupting each other. That's my fault. But yeah. So I know a lot of people are gonna say like, hey, the 3.5 yards per carry is great, but a lot of people are also gonna be like, hey, like it's 3.5 yards against. Don't get me wrong, I was good at defense, but 3.5 yards. Like for
Yep.
these guys, that's almost like underperforming for Allen and Singleton.
Yeah, and I mean, that's something else we talked about, which is something that's definitely worth noting going forward, is that the run game hasn't been explosive yet this year. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
longest carries that the team has had this year is like 21 and 20 yards, and that's by Bo Prabula and Trey Potts. Singleton and Allen, I think, his longest carries each are 18 and 19 yards. Um, I don't think that's somewhat a product of the offensive line's run blocking. It's been good this year. It hasn't been great. They've had a little bit of a tough time the last 2 weeks, but I think these are also two decent front sevens to say the least. I know they may not be full of 4 and 5 star talents, but
Mm-hmm.
they're two very fundamental gap sound defenses that they faced. So I think the last 2 weeks shouldn't be overly concerning for the run game. But as the season goes on, if they're going to beat an Ohio State, if they're going to beat a Michigan, those types of runs are going to have to be broken at some point. So it's a matter of, can they start showing that over the next 3 weeks here, 2 games against Northwestern and UMass. These are games that Penn State should obviously, you know, win pretty comfortably. And these are games you'd like to see the offensive line dominate on the ground. And I would say the offensive line, to a degree, dominated against Iowa. I mean, I know it was only 3.5 yards per carry for the Nittany Lions, offense, 3.8 yards per carry. But the offensive line was getting pretty consistent push all night long, and only five of their 57 rushing attempts got stuffed. I mean, that if you can do that every week, you'll be in a good spot going forward.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely a good point. Like the run blocking, going back to what you were saying before, the run blocking's been eh. I mean, Olu's Olu. The rest has been Keaton Wallace has been struggling a little bit. Norzad, eh. I just don't know what you do to fix that at this point. Because these
Yeah,
are veteran guys. These not. It's not like they're rookies or I should say freshmen, but they've been here for what 4 or 5 years now, and it's like, all right, you got to get it together a little bit.
yeah, I think to a degree the run blocking is what it is. I know PFF isn't perfect, but I mean,
Hmm.
yeah, Olu's the best run blocker, but he's still only being graded out at a 67.8, which is decent. But I mean, it's a far drop from his 88.9 pass blocking grade. He's by
Yeah.
far one of the best pass blockers in the country, but they just haven't been able to really get it going yet under Phil Troutwine on the ground. But when you have the type of running backs who can make things happen despite suboptimal run blocking, it
Hmm.
it hides a lot of those deficiencies. They just haven't had those runs just yet this year. But I don't think it should be an overly major concern for Penn State fans. It's just definitely something that needs to start happening more as they get deeper into the schedule and they have to face two big boys.
Yeah, no, of course. Shifting over to the pass game, I know Drew Allard had a pretty good game, 4 touchdowns,
Yeah,
160 yards, nothing crazy yardage wise.
efficient.
Touchdowns are nice, but yeah, like you said, efficiency. And I think Keandre Lambert-Smith's obviously wide receiver one. I don't think there was any question about that, but
Yeah,
we know that they have a good wide receiver one, they have a good tight end one. Hell, they have a good tight end two.
yeah,
Where's the rest of the receiving core?
yeah. I mean, this is I. They start out well, week 1 and week 2 against West Virginia and Delaware, and I mean, you look around. There's 9 guys who had receptions against Iowa. They've had uh, They've had 9. I forget what they had against Illinois, but it was a solid number. And Delaware, there was a solid number. West Virginia was like 11 guys. But I think the problem is that there's just nobody kind of emerging as that number 3 guy. Obviously, if Trey Wallace is healthy, Trey Wallace is that number 2 guy
Mhm.
for them. He only played 24 snaps against against Iowa. Didn't have any targets. That was after missing Illinois. Um, Honestly, I'm not sure we see a ton of him if he is banged up the next 2 games, or more specifically this weekend against Northwestern. They don't need him to beat Northwestern, um, but there hasn't been that third guy to emerge yet, and it's another one of those things that's really going to have to emerge some time here in the next few weeks before they go into Columbus, because you're going to need more than Keandre Lambert-Smith and Harrison Wallace to beat the Buckeyes. Yes, you have a really good tight end room. Theo Johnson had a really nice game on Saturday against Iowa. Tyler Warren only had 2 receptions, but both were for touchdowns. And then, Caleb Dinkins is somebody who is going to flash here and there, but they really do need a third wide receiver, whether that is Liam Clifford, a Dante Cephas, who had I believe, his most snaps yet as a Nittany Lion this past weekend. Only had 1 reception, but I think it says something that he's starting to see the field a little bit more. But it is definitely a major question mark. But they also haven't really needed to have a guy to prove that just yet, because they're just taking what the opposing defense give them. Drew's a very smart quarterback. He's efficient with the ball. Doesn't throw many dangerous passes. I think they took 1 true deep shot on Saturday against Iowa. So,
Yeah,
but
no,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, no. The wide receiver room is definitely a big question mark still, in my opinion. I think I was hoping that Amari Evans would step up, but it sounds like he's a little banged up too.
yeah,
Harrison Wallace, you talked about. Everyone asked about Caden Saunders, and I know we saw him play some snaps this week, but then the fumble, and it's like, oh, geez, like,
yeah,
I
yeah.
do. Will we see more of him?
Yeah, I think we will. He had a solid game against Illinois where he only had 2 receptions, but it felt like he was much more involved in the game. Of course, being on punt return helps that, but I think he's somebody we'll
Mhm.
continue to see emerge. But it's going to be one of those things where he has to earn that additional playing time, and like everybody else, he just really hasn't separated himself just yet in the wide receiver room. Um, his punt returning, I think this year has been okay. It's been solid. He's had some um, rookie gaffes out there. I think he's let a couple
Mhm.
balls go that he probably should fair catch, instead of taking the risk of it dying at the within the between the 5 and the goal line. That's happened twice, and their 2 biggest games of the season so far. But yeah, I think we'll see him. But he's somebody who definitely still needs to prove himself on the field this season, along with Dante Cephas. I mean, Cephas was supposed to be that dude for this wide receiver room. Now, I never thought he was going to replicate what he did at Kent State, but
Mhm.
I don't think there's. I think it's definitely fair to say he's kind of been a disappointment on the box in the box score, at least so far this season. I know there's adapted to the game, but I think a lot of people would have assumed at this point he would have been, that number 2, number 3 guy for them.
Yeah, no, for sure. Switching to the defense, I mean, you can't say enough good things about what they did this weekend. I know it only translated to what 3 sacks, but there was several forced fumbles, several recovered fumbles.
Yeah,
Chop Robinson continues to prove he's the best edge rusher in the country, probably.
yeah, I think
Um,
so.
yeah, I mean, and then looking at other guys, like I know Amin Vanover when he got a couple snaps, and another guy that everyone asks us about.
Yeah.
But he even looked pretty good. So What are your just overall thoughts on this defense and defensive line in general?
Yeah, so I'll say overall, just quickly going back to the offense and just kind of in the defense is this game as a whole. I think what Penn State did here was take the what an Iowa football team does and just do it better. They basically came out in this game and said, we can play your brand of football and we can do it better than you, and that's what they did. They played suffocating defense, and on the offensive side of the ball, they just continued to run the ball even when they weren't having great success, and they were efficient in the passing game. I mean, 166 yards is about what you would expect out of an Iowa passing game most weeks, and the rushing game, it wasn't overly explosive, but it got the job done, and defensively they played outstanding. Yeah, the defense performance overall Saturday, I mean, obviously one of the best that we've ever seen in Beaver Stadium over the last 25, 30 years. I think there's only been one game in the last 50 years in which they held an opponent to fewer yards, and that was Temple back in 2006 when Temple really was one of the worst programs in all of college football. That front seven continues to dominate. They had a little bit of a slow start to the season, but the last 2 weeks they've really emerged. Iowa only had 16 passing attempts in this game, only had probably 20 dropbacks or so, and Penn State had 10 pressures on those limited dropbacks. Like you said, Chop Robinson is arguably the best pass rusher in the country. Even though he hasn't been able to get to the quarterback a ton just yet, he has been consistently harassing quarterbacks in the backfield. You mentioned Amin Vanover having a nice game, but it's just you got Chop, but then you got Adiza Isaac who had a solid game. You have denied Dennis Sutton who had a forced fumble, depending who you ask in this game. Jalen Reed may have forced that first fumble, but it's just they got not just one guy, not two, three. They got 4 or 5 guys that they truly trust to go out there and get to the quarterback on any passing down. And I think they've been really solid against the run the last few weeks. I know West Virginia wasn't pretty, but that was a very good West Virginia offensive line. Outside of Michigan, that may be the best offensive line they faced all season. That was a very tough running back to face in C.J. Donaldson, just because he's 6'3", 230 pounds. But the last 2 weeks against quality teams, I think they've done a pretty good job against the run, which is encouraging because they're going to have to stop the run against Ohio State, against Michigan.
Yeah, no, and then like you didn't even mention I know you said the front seven, but the back four no one really talked about because they just really didn't play much.
Yeah, I mean
the whole defense got rotated.
The back four has been outstanding this year. I mean, and we'll have the PSU 365 grade up. Podcast up later, but we went through grading each position group through 4 games last night, and we gave this entire secondary for the first 4 games an A+ because they've just been outstanding. They haven't been tested a ton, but when they have been, they've allowed very few big plays. Yes, they'll allow, as the defense as a whole has allowed 1 or 2 big plays, but for every big play they allow, there's about 5 or 6 big defensive plays they make that change the course of a game. And they've been outstanding the whole season, and this entire Penn State defense really has. I mean, number 1 in yards allowed per game right now, which I believe is 219 and a half. They've forced 11 turnovers, which is top 3 in the nation. 8.8 points per game, which is top 5. It's been an outstanding defense, and I think this is a college football playoff caliber defense for Penn State. Hasn't really been tested just yet, but I don't see this Penn State defense being gashed by Ohio State or Michigan this year. I mean, Michigan's kind of going through the motions, I think, through 4 weeks, but Ohio State hasn't really kind of flashed. I mean, their best game was against Western Kentucky.
Yeah, no, now I'm glad you said that because I'm kind of switching to that topic next.
Yeah.
In order to get to that college football playoff, you're probably going to have to win the Big Ten, if not have 1 loss in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
So, and then you look at Michigan. Michigan had struggles again this week. Mind you, they ended up winning 31-7, but they struggled early.
Yeah.
Ohio State struggled all game long versus a very good Notre Dame team. Don't get me wrong, but Notre Dame also threw that one away, in my opinion, with the final 2 plays of the game with 10 people on the field.
Yeah, I
But
mean that entire last drive was quite terrible from the Notre Dame defense.
yeah, and then I guess the only other threat would be Maryland. But do we really see Maryland as a threat?
No, I think Maryland is a team you have to respect because I think
Hmm.
Talia is a very good quarterback. I think he's, I mean, I think he has a chance to go on to the NFL, have a kind of a nice career as, I don't know, a starter, but as, a long time backup. Sure, I think he has those capabilities. But I think compared to Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, I don't think Maryland is really a team that should overly scare people. But I mean, if Penn State or any of those teams doesn't bring their A game, Maryland's a team that can give them a game. Maryland's done that in the past with Ohio State, with Michigan. Penn State
Hmm.
treats that game as it's not a rivalry game
I
to them,
Yeah.
but they treat it as a rivalry game. It feels at times. So they take the Terrapins pretty seriously, which I think has helped. But yeah, I don't think Maryland's probably a true threat, but
Hmm.
on any given day, they could probably give one of these three teams a game.
Well, the first threat's going to be Ohio State in 3 weeks from now, and I just want to talk a little bit about them and
Yeah.
their performance and what do you think how Penn State matches up against them, because this will be at the shoe, it won't be at home.
Yeah, I mean, it's the game in which Penn State's going to be measured by for the most part. Obviously, the Michigan game too, but this is the first time we're going to see Penn State play a truly elite team. And I know some people are going to say Ohio State hasn't looked elite this year, and I would agree. I mean, that defense is pretty damn good, which is going to help them a ton going forward. Um,
Mhm.
that defense is for real. I think that defense can stop a lot of opposing offenses this year. I think they won't have any problem against anybody that's not named Michigan or Penn State. Um, but that offense for Ohio State is just kind of a question mark right now. It hasn't been what you would expect out of an Ohio State offense. Kyle McCord has been solid, but not great. Um, the rushing attack is, I think, still dangerous, but for what they have in that wide receiver room, plus Cade Stover, I feel like you'd be expecting Ohio State to be a little bit more dominant on the off- offensive side of the ball um, so far this season. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. When you have Marvin Harrison Jr. out on either side, it's just kind of like all you have to do is chuck it up to him.
Yeah,
It's not that hard. And their offensive line's filled with talent. They should be able to block from McCord, and he should have more than enough time, especially because you haven't really played anyone good other than Notre Dame. You
yeah.
played Indiana, who you struggled, Youngstown State, who's just the Penguins, they stink, and Western Kentucky, who also kind of stinks. Like this is a team that I honestly, and I'm gonna say this, I think they could lose to Maryland this week.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I'm not expecting it, of course, but I wouldn't be shocked by any means. This is not. This is not, like I said. This is not a Maryland team to take lightly. I think this is one of the
Mhm.
better teams Mike Loxley's had. I think on paper this Maryland team should go 9-3 this year. Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if Maryland keeps this close, gives Ohio State a scare. They've given much better Ohio State teams a scare, and I think this is a much more complete Maryland team than we've seen in the past.
Yeah.
But I mean, just looking across the board, you see the 5.1 yards per carry for Ohio State, which is solid. Um, they're averaging almost 300 passing yards. They're getting the yardage this season. It's just that they're not
Mhm.
turning it into touchdowns, which is I think has to be concerning for Buckeyes fans, considering that two of the best defenses in the country are in their division that they're going to have to face. And uh,
Mhm.
I mean, I think Penn State matches up really well against this Ohio State team. And I think they could go into the shoe in a month and upset the Buckeyes. I think right now I saw the early lines are Ohio State minus 7.5. I think Penn State has a great chance to cover that and win that game outright based off what we've seen, because I think this Penn State defense could go up against anybody, and I think this Penn State offense will be able to move the ball against anybody on their
Yeah.
schedule too.
No, that's a lot. So 7.5 is a little extreme for me. But yeah. So I take it back. They actually have a bye week this week, and then they play Maryland next week.
Okay,
Then
so
Purdue. Then Penn State coming to town. The nice thing for Penn State is you're also getting Northwestern,
yeah,
who's whatever.
a
Bye
bye week.
week.
Yep.
and then you get UMass, which is basically another bye week, and then you kind of just prep. You probably prep. You probably look ahead a little bit because this UMass team is just not good.
Yeah,
Northwestern's not good. I think you look ahead. Honestly, you can't say it as like the players can't look ahead, coaches can't look ahead, but we as media can look ahead because it's almost 2 guaranteed wins, pretty much.
yeah. I mean, if either of those games are close, there's many issues that need to be discussed, and
Yeah.
and beating Ohio State and Michigan at that point should be out of the question. Yeah, these should not be close games. Penn State's a 24-point favorite against Northwestern right now, I believe. I would expect Penn State to cover that. And against Northwestern, against UMass, they should put up a similar performance like they did against Delaware. I guess, yeah, I think over the next few weeks, again, in these two games, I expect Penn State to pretty much come out and play pretty vanilla football offensively. Defensively,
Mm-hmm.
they don't have to do anything special against these teams. They're going to dominate these teams dominate these opposing offenses. And I think that's something to note over the first 4 weeks, too, is Penn State hasn't had to do anything special offensively. I think we've only seen a portion of the playbook. I think once they get into Ohio State and once they get into Michigan, we're going to see a much more expansive playbook out of Mike Yursich. But over the first 4 weeks and over the next two games, they don't have to do anything special to win these games. They don't have to do anything special to put up 30 points. They just have to, the offensive line just has to do okay. Drew Aller has to be efficient, and the running game just has to do what they're good at, which is just hitting the hole hard and running. And I think that's why Katron Allen has had such a solid start to the season. Nick Singleton, I think, has been a little bit more indecisive. But I think for Penn State, the next two games, it's just working out the kinks in the offense. I don't know if there's really anything you could really improve defensively. And, work out whatever there is, work out the kinks and be ready to go into Columbus on, what would that be, October 23rd? October 21st?
23rd?
Yeah.
21st. Yeah, 21st.
Yeah, I think the next couple weeks are just about working out those kinks and going into Columbus with all those kinks worked out on October 21st. And because that should be a matchup of top 5 programs, I think, at the time. Maybe if nobody else loses in front of them, but I have a hard time believing that won't be a top 5 matchup.
Yeah, the only thing is, I think that Maryland team I really think they might be able to pull it off in Ohio State in 2 weeks.
I wouldn't roll it out. I think that's definitely a game that Maryland can give Ohio State a game. I know people are gonna say it's Maryland, like they do this every year, but this is a very solid Maryland team. I think they could give the big three. They could give the big three scares any given day. It's just about which of the big three, show up. Like if Michigan shows up, like the way they have through the first 4 weeks, and it feels like almost anybody could give Michigan a scare. But Michigan seems to go through the motions in the first half, and in the second half they kind of lock the games down. But yeah,
So,
I wouldn't be surprised if that's a very close game in 2 weeks.
So let's shift over to recruiting because there was some pretty big news yesterday. There could be some big news down the line today. But DJ McClary, 4-star Rivals 150 kid, class of 2025, ended up committing to Penn State. He visited for the whiteout. Just talk a little bit about him and what kind of stands out.
Yeah, what stands out to me about him is just the athleticism and speed he has. Not the biggest linebacker. I think we have him at 6'2", 205, but he has sideline to sideline speed and athleticism, which I think could allow him to move to the Sam or the Will at the next level. But even if his coverage skills don't match up well at the next level, this is still a guy you could put at the Mike position, I think, and he's going to be a physical linebacker for Penn State and somebody who can be the leader in the middle of a defense. Kind of reminds you of a Curtis Jacobs type player, I think, as long as those coverage skills do translate, which with his athleticism and speed, I'd be shocked if they didn't. I think this is obviously a great pickup for Penn State. I think he has a chance to be a really good linebacker for them. One of the best players in the country at the position. Over at Rivals, we have him as a 5.9 Rivals rating, 4-star prospect, number 124 in the country, number 2 in the state of New Jersey, and the 6th best inside linebacker. Um, big pickup for Penn State. And this is a guy we've been saying since February is somebody to keep an eye on because Penn State was in the lead then. And despite picking up offers from Tennessee, Michigan, USC, Ohio State, they've remained in the lead. And he's been locked in with the Nittany Lions figuratively for quite a while now, it seems. And it just took until this weekend to make it official. To pick up another elite New Jersey prospect after losing Jalen Matthews, I think is also kind of a big storyline. They've been gaining a lot of momentum in New Jersey thanks to Khalil Ahmad, and losing Matthews was a big hit, but to go back in New Jersey and pick up another elite prospect, it shows that they're not going to be discouraged just because one recruitment didn't go their way. They're going to continue chipping away at these New Jersey guys. And when Penn State football has been at their best in the past, it's been because they've been able to recruit the elite talent out of New Jersey, and this is a big step.
Yeah, no, this is a huge get, and I just want to preface this by saying he does everything for his high school team. So, like, you look at the stats, he's the leading passer, he's the leading rusher, he's the leading tackler. That's just this season.
He's the best
Last
player
season,
on
he
the
had
field. Any given
yeah,
week.
by far. 2,000 yards rushing last season with 27 touchdowns. And then he had 131 tackles, too.
Yeah.
The man's a beast. Like, there's no way around it. I wish he played at a better school.
Yeah.
But Schneider is on the rise. They're getting a little bit better. They used to be good back in, like, the 80s and 90s, but they're starting to get a lot better now. New coach over there, and Aaron Dobson, who's a big fan of Penn State. So this is just a huge get. And like you said, they did lose number 1 in New Jersey and Jalen Matthews recently, who actually visited Georgia this weekend, who we've kind of hinted at has been pushing for him. But I wouldn't be shocked if DJ took over that number 1 spot when it's all said and done. He's that good, and he'll keep moving up in the overall rankings too. I know you said 124. I wouldn't be shocked if he finishes in the top 100.
No, absolutely, and I think this is just also the tip of the iceberg for Penn State in New Jersey. Obviously, it's going to be hard with getting back in that Jalen Matthews race. I think it's safe to say there's some factors for Penn State that won't go their way in that recruitment, but they're in a good spot for guys like Quincy Porter. John Forrester is a guy they could be in a good spot for, but we'll see if the running back position may be filled in the near future. But Jameer Joseph, Kamar Archie, Cameron Miller, Desi Jones, Cam Smith, Michael Thomas, these are all guys that Penn State has been recruiting the last few years, and if they continue to push for, should be in really good spots for. They really, Penn State, Michigan had that run in New Jersey where they were going in and taking kids out of there every single year. I feel like Penn State has a chance here this year in 2025 cycle and beyond that they can start going in New Jersey and kind of pick and choose who they want to go after. And if they go after those kids, they're going to have a good shot at landing most of those kids. But yeah, go back to McClary. I agree. Wish he would play at a better school just so we could see what he could do against better talent. But what he does is he dominates the lesser talent, which for a prospect like him is what you want to see. You don't want to see him going out there putting up meh stats. You want to see him going out there and dominating every single week on the field, both sides of the ball. I mean, he's going to finish his high school career probably with 500 plus tackles or 5,000 rushing yards. I mean, I don't know the history of New Jersey football from a stats perspective, but I'm going to guess there's not many guys in the state who've ever done that.
I couldn't even tell you actually off the top of my head, but I'm sure it's up there.
I'm sure it's a small list.
Yeah, there's guys like trying to think actually. It's a good point. Minka, Jabril.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think who tackles. Who would lead in tackles? It's a good question. I really don't know.
There probably some linebackers in the 90s and stuff and 80s, but he dominates. He's the best player on the field every given week, and I think he's going to develop into a really nice linebacker for Penn State down the road. Like I said, I think Curtis Jacobs is a solid comparison, but he has that athleticism and speed that Penn State's really been going after at the linebacker position, because they also do like using the linebackers to rush the passer, as we've seen the last few years. But this may not be the only good news for Penn State.
That's true. Before we leave off of Jersey and get into that topic, New Jersey recruiting as a whole, like you said before, has been great under Cleo Ahmad.
Yeah.
They're getting back in the state. John Forrester is one name you mentioned. I know he's technically a running back. He likes Penn State a lot. We're not sure really what's going to happen there because he could play the slot, but it does seem like Penn State's going to go elsewhere at running back for this class.
I think that's fair to say.
Yeah,
If
and
if they go for a third running back in the 2025 recruiting class, obviously they still have to land a second. But if they would go for a third, I think he would fit into that third category. I think for a second running back, there's a couple guys ahead of him. But if they were for some reason to go for three in the 2025 cycle, he could be a guy.
and that guy who could be number 2 because they have Keandre Barker on board.
Yep.
Could be T-Quay Hayes, who's deciding today at 3:30. I mean, if we're being honest, he just visited Penn State Saturday.
Yep.
Where do we think he's going to go?
Yeah, that's what I kind of said in my Nitbits preview on Friday of just 20 visitors to know. I said something along the lines of, like, I'm not going to go in depth here. He has scheduled a commitment for Monday. He's visiting Penn State on Saturday. You could probably do it. We could probably all do the math. Sometimes there's surprise in store. I mean, I remember just last cycle, now not a in-state kid, but Trayon Webb out of Florida. Everybody in the industry thought he was going to Penn State, and then he committed to Florida when he announced his decision. Kind of surprised everybody. But I would be very surprised if at 3:31 p.m. that TK Hayes is not Tyke Hayes is not a Nittany Lion. We'll see if that in fact does happen. But if he does commit to Penn State, that's a really nice pickup for the Nittany Lions. I mean, he's another elite running back prospect, another elite in-state prospect. And what else can you say about just Jaywan Sire's ability to recruit the running back position? I know I think both guys in the 2023 class ended up as high 3 stars, but outside that, Cade, Tron, and Nick were both 4 stars. Quinn and Martin and why am I blanking right
now? For some reason, Corey Smith.
Corey Smith, yeah. I was thinking Cam Smith from New Jersey again. Corey Smith, obviously, both elite running back prospects, top 250 kids. I think maybe both 150 kids. I know Quinn's still in the top 100. 2026, they already have Messiah Mickens, who's has potential 5-star talent. Sider continues to clean up at the running back position, even if Hayes does not commit to Penn State today. But if he does, I mean, even more so.
Yeah, I'd be a little shocked if he didn't. I know you said 3:31 p.m., but we know how these kids operate. If it's an Instagram live like he's planning, we're looking at like 3:55.
Yeah.
That's just how it works. But yeah, no, the fact that Sider's getting these guys again and again and again, and then Messiah Mickens commits and is a top 40 kid already, and it's like, oh my god, dude! Like, how do you keep this guy around without promoting him to OC? You can't promote him to OC because you're Sitch's there and he's doing good. So it's like, it's a weird spot. Like, in an ideal world, and tell me if I'm wrong here, your Sitch maybe gets a head coaching job somewhere. That's fine. He moves on, and then Sider just, here you go. Here's the OC job.
Yeah, I think to eventually, like, you got to find a way just to keep getting him more money. And if Yurcich does leave for a head coaching job, which I know some people think is a real possibility, I also think I've never really got the sense from Yurcich that he really ever wants. I think he wants to be a head coach, but I think he's going to be very particular about where he goes. I know people will point to him interviewing for FAU last year, but I mean, it's not, uncommon for coaches in college football to interview for jobs just to interview and just get that interview experience for a head coaching job, but also it's a way to get a little bit of a pay raise. So I mean, I'm not going to rule that out. I don't know the specifics behind that interview, but yeah, if your shit's left, Sider would be a guy who you absolutely would have to think Penn State would have to heavily consider for that OC job just to be able to give him more money and keep him around, because he is by far Penn State's single best recruiter, which I mean is kind of a hard thing to say because, I mean, Terry Smith does a great job in the secondary. Yurcich has been very good at quarterbacks recently. I mean, but Sider just not what he does at running backs, but what he can do for Penn State going into Florida and helping take the kids out of Florida. They got to do everything they can to keep him around.
Yeah, no, 100%. So, Boy Hayes, I think I Tikwe. Am I pronouncing that correct? Probably not, but I'm not good with pronunciation either. So,
Yeah, I'm not the greatest person to ask about it, but I believe what I wrote down. I was listening to an interview with him yesterday, and it's I believe it was Taiki.
Taiki Hayes. Okay, gotcha. So it sounds like all signs are pointing good there. It sounds like they also just got TJ McClary.
Yep.
Let's dive into 2024 before we sign off real quick, because
Sure.
I know the 2024 class is somewhat done for the most part.
Yeah.
They had 2 uncommitted guys on campus this weekend.
Yeah, well, yeah, they had the 2 big ones, and then they had 2 other guys who are maybe guys kind of like a Chimdi Ono type recruitment to watch if they miss on the 2 big ones, of course, Jalen Harvey, Ernest Willer. But there's I'm gonna and I'll pull up the list to get the other 2 names. I'm gonna butcher them, which I mean, it took longer than usual for me to butcher a name. Usually it's the Polynesian names that get me. But, yeah, let's talk about Harvey and Willer. I think Harvey, I talked to one source with an idea on the recruitment for Harvey, and it was basically, he keeps saying all the right things for Penn State, but, I mean, he's been saying the right things for Penn State now for over a year. We put our future cast in for Harvey, I think, last October. Here we are a couple days away from October a year later, and he's still uncommitted. I think Penn State. I still feel confident in that future cast for Harvey, and I still think Penn State lands him at the end. But it's also been a recruitment that has not gone to plan. I think it's fair to say USC was probably the leader for him for a short while at the tail end of the summer, heading into the fall. I think Penn State over the next few weeks, months, whether he makes a commitment this fall or signing day or whatever, maybe he pulls one of those recruitments where he just shows up on campus one day, and that's where he'll end up. But I think Penn State did themselves good this weekend by getting him on campus. I think the distance will help them in the end as well. Ernest Willer, that recruitment, I still don't know what really is going to happen in that one, just because there's a lot of question marks. I think not just from Penn State's perspective, but almost everybody recruiting him. So I said that if Penn State makes a push, I think they have a good chance of landing him. I continue to think that he's pretty high on Penn State. It's just, what is Penn State's level of interest right now, and where does he project to for them? I mean, we have him ranked as a defensive end. I can see that, but I think you can also see him moving to DT at the next level. He's at that 6'3", I think 250, 260 mark.
Something like that.
So, I mean, it's very easy to see him gaining that extra weight and being a DT at the next level as well. So, yeah, I think those are the 2 big ones to watch. But also, I think Penn State's going to be going after some flip candidates here over the next few months as well at the wide receiver position. Of course, guys like Chance Robinson down in Florida is one that always is mentioned. I don't know if they're going to have a chance to really get that one done, but
see what you did there.
There's quite a few others. Rico Scott, Hornsby in New Jersey is another one. Yeah, I mean
Cam Coleman too. We mentioned, or I should say, Adam Gordon. You mentioned today as a Texas A&M, another Texas A&M wide receiver that Penn State's trying to get on a visit.
Yeah,
I know.
Trying to think of him actually, and I couldn't think of. But yeah, and I mean Phoenix City is an area that in Alabama that Penn State's had success recruiting in the past. Now, I don't know if they are going to be able to flip Coleman just because that's a big fish to flip, but if they can get him on campus for an official visit, anything's possible at that point.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I think the eye should be on the other Texas A&M wide receiver commit, Jalen Hornsby. It sounds like he was close to flipping this offseason. or not even this off. Yeah, I guess this off season. Yeah, back in June or July, whatever
This
it was.
summer.
Might
Yeah.
might have been August. I can't remember for sure, but we posted on our boards. It sounds like he was very 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 close to flipping. Sounds like he wanted to go to Penn State from the get, and then A&M comes in, does their SEC thing, asterisk money sign. You know,
Yeah.
can make the SEC logo whatever you
Yeah.
want. But but yeah, so I would keep a close eye on that one, see if they could do anything. And then the one visitor that's not a wide receiver that almost, I shouldn't say visitor, was supposed to visit but didn't visit, Kaj Sanders, Rutgers commit, 4-star
Yeah.
safety. I think we got to keep a close eye on him because
Yeah.
we found out his girlfriend goes to Penn State, and that's
And
probably
I
going to play
mean,
a significant factor.
no, yeah, some people may laugh at that, but I mean, it's. I'm not going to repeat what our one good friend who worked in college football recruiting once said to us about it, but yeah, girlfriends do play a factor. I mean, some people point to Julian Fleming's. I don't know if they're still dating, but Julian Fleming's girlfriend at the time in high school went to Penn State, and obviously he ended up going to Ohio State. But yeah, the girlfriend factor always plays a factor to a degree, and even beyond that, I think he's a guy that Penn State has always had an eye on. He wasn't at the top of their board, I think, at points earlier this year, but with how their board has kind of played out and how they have the ability here to fulfill some extra holes per se, because I think they like their secondary class. He's definitely a guy to keep an eye on, and I think we can't not talk about recruiting this weekend without mentioning the big name that was really on campus, which was Bryce Underwood.
Of course.
I mean,
Got all about him.
will Penn State have a chance to land him? I don't think they ultimately do, but it's a statement just to have this type of talent on campus. I mean, it says something just as a whole. Other recruits are going to see, hey, the number 3 player, I think he's our number 3 player in the country, top quarterback. He visited Penn State. Maybe I should go visit Penn State. Like, maybe I should go visit, give it a chance. He's been to Penn State twice now this year. I think they're in the mix per se. I don't think they ultimately land him, but I wouldn't be shocked if they receive an official visit from him. And if you get an official visit, anything can happen at that point.
Yeah, and there's a couple other quarterbacks on campus too, and Malik Washington, who's top 250 kid out of Maryland. Matt Zollers, who's down the street kind of, got a Pitt offer. So I mean, I don't know if that's just Pitt just being petty, but
I think he's, if they take a 2 quarterback class in 2025, I think he's a very interesting possibility for that second quarterback spot. But I mean, other guys that are on campus that really we can be watching out for the next few weeks. Brady O'Hara. We haven't listed as tight end. He's actually being recruited as an offensive tackle for Penn State. But he's a guy we have future casts in for. Offensive lineman Joshua Williams out of Haverford. I think that's Penn State's recruitment to lose. He was back on campus this weekend. I mean, in 2020, safety Canoa Winston, cousin of KJ Winston, goes to Gonzaga, where Olu Fashanu went as well. I mean, got to watch there. 2026 class, you got guys like Tyler Merrill, Preston Carey, Colson Gadden, a Penn State legacy, Albert Hill, Marcelo Ovidi. I mean, there's a lot of guys on campus this weekend that we're going to be talking about a lot in the future as well. I mean, Larry Moon in 2027 class. The big one that didn't end up showing was Trent Wilson in that 2025 class, but they'll have plenty of cracks at him. He's not too far down the road.
Yeah, I remember seeing him this summer. I think what was it, at the Rivals camp? I think it was. It was one of those camps.
Yeah,
I remember seeing him. He's a freak, but St. Francis kid. Let's be honest, Penn State.
Yeah, and the 2 other 2024 kids that are on campus uncommitted was one was Lugard Pai. I'm butchering that. But defensive end out of Maryland, 6'6", 225. Has been picking up quite a few offers recently. Definitely a name to watch out for here. The remainder of the cycle, if Penn State looks to fulfill a need at defensive end position last minute. And then the other one was Ugo Nwati, which is out of St. Augustine Prep in New Jersey.
He's an interesting one because I'm kind of familiar with him, and he's starting to blow up a little bit soon. Not as blow up as Lugard's been blown up, because I think
Yeah.
Lugard went from 0 Power 5 offers to like 12 now
Yeah,
in the past like 2 weeks. So
he's having a really nice run. Gonna end up a good chance he ends up in the Big Ten, I think.
yeah, I think that's definitely a very good possibility. I wouldn't be surprised if Penn State threw one out on him soon. He's kind of like similar recruitment to Chimdiona. He got that
Yeah.
tape out there for his first 3 games, and it's like, oh shit, look at this kid. Like,
Yeah.
let's watch him.
Ugo's very
So,
more intriguing. I think that's one of those, like everybody. I mean, you look at his offer sheet; it's Maine, Rhode Island, Stony Brook right now. But
mhm.
if he continues to flash, perhaps he's a guy that starts picking up offers. But he could also just be a high end walk on candidate as well.
Oh, at this point, I mean, if you can turn Dominic DeLuca into a superstar, some of these
Yeah,
walk-ons
yeah,
might be worth watching now.
yeah. I mean, we could have mentioned DeLuca during the Iowa stuff, but
Yeah.
he had a tough game in West Virginia, but ever since then he's been what I like to call him Mr. Opportunity, because he's just taking advantage of any time he's on the field. He's forced
Yeah.
turnovers in 3 straight
Absolutely.
games now.
Yeah. So, I don't think there's much else to say other than the 3:30 commitment of Tyke Hayes. Got it right that
Yep.
time, I think.
Like,
But anything else on your mind, Dylan, before we sign off?
no, no. I think just overall, I think after 4 games, Penn State fans have to kind of feel pretty good where the Nittany Lions are, and I think the Nittany Lions have confirmed in these first 4 games that they are a contender for the Big Ten. And I think, I mean, I don't know how you feel, but I think after 4 weeks, Penn State is a legitimate college football playoff contender. I think this is a team that can not only make the college football playoffs, but I think this is a team that could win a game in the college football playoffs, and then who knows who you match up against in a potential national championship. But I think this Penn State team is one of the top 5 teams in the country. I think these 3 Big Ten teams may be 3 of the top 5, 6 teams in the country, and unfortunately for them, only 1, maybe 2 of them are going to be able to get into the dance.
Yeah, I think it's hard to argue otherwise. I think it's hard to argue that they're not arguably the top team in the Big Ten right now.
I mean, based
Um,
off resume, three Power 5 wins. Three of those teams have winning record. I mean, all 3 have winning records.
yeah. So, well, I guess that's gonna be all for us. Went a little long on our first one, but this is another our first episode of Good Morning Happy Valley, and stay tuned for more.